Good day and welcome to HVAC 350. I'd like to have a short lecture on purchasing. By no means are you going to be an expert in understanding how purchasing happens in a mechanical contractor's office, but just want to give you some thoughts on this to use as you're going through, especially if you don't work in the office, if you work out in the field. Keep in mind that when you're purchasing on a project, up to 50% of the project could be materials and equipment that go into the job itself. Sometimes you'll see it less. I personally haven't seen it much more than 50%. You know, if you think about it, 50% of the job is materials and equipment, then you have roughly 30-some% that's going to be on labor, and then you'd have other items such as subcontracts, or you'd have other items that you'd have for the project, rentals for lifts or that type of thing, and overhead and profit and that much. So you'll see different numbers that go with the amount, but with that, that's quite a big percentage of a project, and that is actually a possible area to turn into a profit generator for the company. And when we look at this, when we're looking at purchasing, any company wants to minimize their costs and maximize profits. And one of the ways to do that is to have a set strategy for doing something, whatever it is. Purchasing is just as important as setting up a good schedule for the installation of products. When we look at the purchasing side, typically one person is assigned the purchaser. On large companies, that's all that person will do all day. On a smaller firm, they'd be multitasking, doing other items. But with the systems we have in place now, with everything electronic, it's real simple to have maintained accurate and complete record keeping. It helps us to make sure we have timely deliveries on all the equipment. When we're purchasing, we'll put down when we need it delivered, and we'll go through an example shortly of that. And it gives us an understanding of what needs to be purchased. And just because you get good prices or good terms for purchasing doesn't guarantee that purchasing is profitable for a company. There's just certain things that could mess up the purchasing process, and I just make sure you understand a few of them that go on. First of all, you want to make sure that standardized purchase orders are used on your projects, and that just means that there's going to be a form, whether it's electronic or something. Typically, it is electronic, something that's able to be emailed or texted, for that matter. They've got them going that way too now. What I'm hearing is what they'll do is they'll depending on what's being purchased, if it's a small ticket item that would be at a supply house of some sort, they could go ahead and email a small one. But there's really two different types of purchases that are made. One is a definitive scope purchase, and we'll talk about that. And the other one's going to be a blanket order. We'll get to those in a little bit. But the purchase order's got to be filled out carefully, and I'll see an example shortly. There's nothing more aggravating as a project engineer or manager. And when you're reviewing the project financial side, and you look and find someone else's project information put on yours, or conversely, you don't find that the air handling unit or units that go to your project, you don't see them hitting your project. They're probably on someone else's. So you want to make sure purchase orders are created carefully. And I could, if we were sitting here over a cup of coffee, I could talk to you about some things where sometimes you will see purchases put on your project that belong somewhere else by someone that's higher up the food chain at work than you are, and that's always interesting to have those conversations. But it gives a clear instruction and complete instructions for shipment and delivery, and we want to make sure the purchase orders that is both received and it's accurate. It's really the only tool a project manager has to monitor and control purchasing across the project. So it's real important that they're done correctly, and it's always done in writing of some sort, because memories don't work very well. Purchase order purpose is to form a contract that binds the company to another company for materials or equipment or services. It could be a subcontractor. Okay, it's a control document used by the office to track whatever is being purchased, and it's used in the field to track the order and to validate or verify that the items for proper items and quantities of those items. So what would be on a purchase order? It would be what is wanted, how should it be packaged, how is it shipped, when shipment is delivered, and a basis of payment for them. For example, with the train company, if you're purchasing modular climate changers, which are air handling units that are sectional, for lack of a better way to say it, they can be bolted together. When you order them, you can specify that you want each item or each section shipped separately, or you can specify that the maximum length on those can be 5 feet or 9 feet or some number if you need to be able to get those into a service elevator to get them up at the top of a building or something. So that's where we put that information on these also. When we dissect a purchase order, you'll see that it has quantities and pricing, the company's job, purchase order number, or other needed control codes for payment and for proper document flow. Any references to plans and specifications, specific delivery dates, any packaging and shipping specifications, delivery notification requirements. This would be, for example, if we want to have someone notified that a piece of equipment would be shipped 24 hours from now or 48 hours from now, so we can make sure we have a way to remove that from the flatbed or however it's being delivered. And then list of documents needed from the supplier, such as invoices, delivery packing slips, etc. And what we want to do is, and obviously once it's written, we want to get a supplier's acknowledgement that everything is going to be accepted. And once that's signed, that it becomes a legal document, and the document can be modified at any time. Modifying legal documents, typically you would cloud in the area that needs to change, and you write the change to the side of it, and you initial it, or you just redo another document and say that it supersedes the prior purchase order. So there's a couple different ways to do that. This would be a typical purchase order, and there's a couple anomalies on this that we'll get through in a second. But ABC Mechanical, this company is purchasing with a purchase order number right here, 1021, from the Train Company, shipping to the Granger building, to Doug Zentz, because he likes chillers from Train. We have a date here. We've got a requisitioner, shipped via Best Way. This is an interesting thing. See where it says FOB, freight on board. That means whatever this address is here means wherever we're buying it from has to pay to ship it to this location. So if I didn't fill that in, technically the Train Company would not pay to have that chiller shipped from La Crosse, Wisconsin to Big Rapids, Michigan. And then terms are net 60 days. This is for payment on it. And in here we have quantity of 1. CHLR1 would probably be a number that would come off of the building drawings, off of the mechanical schedule. It describes what the chiller is here. You can see the reference to plans and specifications. You'll notice that it's dated 2003. So bear in mind that I doctored this up. I've got a date of 2010 here. I've got a date of 2003. Typically those would be within the same timeline. This would be before this date. And it says it's asking for a certain delivery date in accordance with plans and specs again. You can see a price and a total. Ferris is tax exempt, so it's not anything that would go there, and you can see that shipping is included. And send all correspondence to this person here, and send 2 copies of your invoice. Just has some minor items along with that. So purchase order helps to give us a lot of different information. The terms and conditions on the back of purchase orders are very company specific, and I am not going to read these. There's 3 slides of these to look at. This is all off of one purchase order, and this is taken from one major provider of equipment and controls that's in the United States right now. But you can see in here there are different items that are ID'd, like separate invoices must be rendered for each shipment. If you want to, if this company that purchased this would pay for it on the next, or we could pay for it before the payment is due, what is the cash discount that we would be able to see in doing that? So take your time, pause the video, and just take a look through these. I'm not going to be testing you or quizzing you on terms and conditions in the back of a purchase order, but just gives you an idea of some of the items that would have to, that are typically put in. And then in addition to that, also, they would have to get signed here, and they would be accepting the terms and conditions. I'm going to go through a couple other items very quickly, and this happens to be when we're purchasing. One of them is a bill of lading and a packing list. A bill of lading is used by the shipper. For example, if we had to purchase 30 variable air volume boxes, and they could fit 10 of them on a pallet, The shipper itself would have 3 pallets for this project. So you would have on a bill of lading, we would say there would be 3 pallets of something. Now it doesn't really care what something is. The shipper just cares that there's 3 things that have to get dropped off. But inside of each of the pallets would be a packing list which would detail everything that's in that delivery. Sometimes you would see a packing list that would be, in this case, if I had 3 pallets shipping at the same time, they might have one packing list that would have all 3 pallets, but usually what I've seen is having 3 separate packing lists in case one of the pallets doesn't show up for whatever reason. So someone has to, when a project is being delivered, someone has to look at it, and they look for any physical damage. If there's any damage, or if it says 3 items and you only have 2, that's a problem. Then that has to be immediately notified. The project manager is going to want to know that. The accounting department is going to know about it so they don't pay some for something that's not there. And as soon as everything has been signed and it looks like everything is there, an invoice is going to be sent from the supplier right away to foster cash flow there and get payment for what they've sent. This is an example of a bill of lading. And in this case here, they're buying 500 bolts of fabric, but it's actually on 10 pallets. So when you look at this, kind of different. I mean, there's a lot of different things going on, but it's what they're going to be signing for is 10 pallets. They don't really know what's in here. It'd be no different than us with the VAV boxes, or if I'm ordering parts and pieces for a temperature control system. If you think about it, when we go ahead and order items, quite often something will not be in stock or it's got to be back ordered. So you'll get a shipment with some things, but not everything that's on it. So you might have multiple shipments for the same order quite often. But when these items show up, we want to look for damage. We want to look for the correct quantity of packages. If we do see damages, it has to be noted right then, because the shipper is responsible to pay for any damages that happen, and damages happen all of the time. So it's important to note them. If it's happened during shipment, then we will get paid as mechanical contractors to fix whatever's damaged, and they will pay the bill for that. Now, if we don't catch that, let's say they unload some stuff and we find some damage later, we'd have to go back to the manufacturer and request for that to be covered under warranty, and sometimes that could be a little dicey, but usually they'll work with you on that. But under warranty like that, quite often you will not get paid labor for doing that, because you might just get the parts for nothing. But if something were to fail where the unit is warranted, you would get both labor and the parts to fix that on a equipment failure. A packing list is different than a bill of lading. This would have a detailed list of everything on there. So if we went back to the pallets of variable air volume boxes, it would list out quantity of each size box that would be in there, and it would have a full accounting of everything that's on that pallet or in that shipment. Usually they don't have prices listed on there. This is going to be signed by the person unloading the products. As soon as that's done, that gets typically scanned and sent into the office to the accounting people, who will attach that to the purchase order. So when they go to pay it the next month, they would know that these items all showed up and can be paid. A couple of ways they do purchases. One is a definitive scope purchase, and one's a blanket scope purchase. And these are pretty simple. Definitive scope purchases are ones for a project where they have an exact item, like that chiller example we had on that purchase order a few slides ago. That is a specific item. If we were going to write a subcontract to Johnson Controls for temperature controls, or someone for piping and ductwork insulation, it would be specific to that project. They're going to have the same dollar amounts, the correct dollar amounts on them, and the project manager's got to review the terms and conditions of the construction contract and what the terms and conditions for the company are, and sometimes they have to make modifications so that they will match each other. Now, instead of a definitive scope purchase, there's a blanket scope purchase possibility, and these are typically written by project engineers and by superintendents or foremen on the job, where if they need, for example, a couple of bundles of 3/4 inch copper, that's something that the purchaser of the company typically won't just order something like that. Or let's talk about some simple things like some duct sealant or some simple box of screws or bolts for hanging things. Quite often with those, the purchaser for the company will have an agreement with local suppliers, and we allow our foremen and project engineers to go ahead, and we'll give them a bogey maximum amount that they can order for a project. And we have to make sure that they are contacting accounting to make sure that they have the right purchase order number, so it's always tracked to an individual person and then to an individual part of a building possibly also. So two different types. One is very specific. One is for purchasing odds and ends that are more like commodity items that we need quite a bit. Issues with project managers as far as purchase orders. They want to make sure the project managers determine the bill of materials scope of work, the time frame required for the contract schedule, for the production of shop drawings, submittal review, fabrication, and delivery to the job site. So we want to make sure all these are set before we would issue a purchase order. And terms and conditions need to, those have to be set to protect the company in case something were to happen incorrect with that purchase. As far as equipment purchasing on large ticket items, usually there's a price on products that's set after the project has been estimated. So it's typically not a variable item. The cost to obtain and the installation of the equipment can be difficult to manage as compared to just purchasing it. When you think about a large chiller, there's all kinds of things that could go wrong on unloading it, moving it around, so we want to move it the least amount as possible. And then the process for specifying, purchasing, and handling the equipment is pretty complex, and there's some errors that could happen with that virtually at any time. So when we're looking at purchasing equipment on large ticket items, the easiest thing we can do is to write a purchase order for it, and then all kinds of other things can happen after that. Now, I'm not going to go through all the different types of documents that you could possibly see on a job site or on a project, because they change quite a bit around the country. But simple ones are transmittal sheets, and we'll see an example of this shortly. A transmittal sheet is anytime we want to go ahead and transfer information or get information to other players on the construction process. We actually put a letter that says what we're transmitting. If it's like submittals, we would say 5 copies of a submittal, or if it's a shop drawing or an engineer drawing, we would say what it is, and we'll see an example of that in just a second. There's submittal sheets, which would also be a way to go ahead and track the submittals as they go through. A submittal, again, is we're trying to get approval after the project has been awarded. Prior to us ordering the equipment and materials, we want to make sure that the engineer approves that. So we would contact our suppliers. They would give us information on everything we intend to order and install. We would put that in a document, forward it to the general contractor or construction manager. They would forward it to the architect. They would forward it to the mechanical engineer, who would review our document in its entirety, and they would approve it, approve with notes, or disapprove what we've sent in. If it's disapproved, it comes back to us. Well, either way, any of the ways it comes back to us. If it's disapproved, we have to go ahead and change whatever they want and resubmit it. If it's approved, as noted, we have to find what they've changed with on it, make sure that our suppliers provide things correctly, or it'll be a straight approval process. So submittals, very important in the project sequence. Shop drawings, if we have to engineer anything like ductwork in a mechanical room that was too difficult for the mechanical engineer to lay out, we may have to do that. Any IOM manuals after the project has been after the equipment's been installed. Any testing reports that we have, that would be on equipment performance prior to installation. Air water balance reports, as-built reports, startup notices, and when we look at test reports, that could be after startup notices also. Any warranty letters that we have to write. And a warranty letter would be, in most projects, we have to warrant for parts and materials and labor, so the wrong thing, for 1 year after the project has been started. And it could be equipment specific or the entire project at one time. For example, if I'm going to do a fast food restaurant, we would probably do the entire building at one time, because those are very fast in the construction scheme. And we'd probably just put the whole thing as one warranty. If we started in October 1st, it would run through September 30th of the next year. Quite often on warranties, though, on larger projects, we might start one air handling unit or 2 or 3 air handling units at one time, maybe the chiller system at one time, maybe one of the chillers out of the 3 at one time. So they can be specific to individual equipment or entire systems. And then the goal of most mechanical contractors is to get that maintenance contract. The reason for that is it's a profit center. It keeps your service technicians busy around the year, but it also tethers the customer to you. So if something goes wrong on the building, you'll get a crack to do work with them. This is a letter of transmittal. When you look in here, it could be all kinds of different things: shop drawings, copy of a letter, quantities, prints, change orders, all kinds of different items in here. And it just is a way to identify. So you would circle, if it was a change order we were putting in, we'd circle that. We'd put some information in here. You can see there's some items in here for submittals, and this would be quantity, dates, and drawing numbers that are on there. So different items that we might see with that. A couple of other forms that you might see would be one to track equipment, where you'd have different ways as far as the vendor, symbols off of the drawings, different dates for submittals, if they had to be resubmitted, when the drawings went to the vendor, when was the requested date, what's the ship date, do we get the operation and maintenance manuals, etc. This is another delivery schedule form. This one would be for the entire project. Again, who are we buying it from, what is it, what's the purchase order number, when was it ordered, when's the ship date, when is the anticipated delivery, when's the actual delivery. So there's a couple of different ways. And then the one last form is, you can see, a materials and equipment release form. And in this case here, you could look at once a product has been manufactured there, we could release it for shipment. So this gives you a little bit of an idea of some of the concepts that we go through when we're looking at purchasing from a mechanical contractor's point of view. Thank you, and have a great day.